As a society, it's quite difficult to know where you're going unless you know where you've been, and the technology we have nowadays allows us to digitally capture our historic environment and keep that for future generations of Scots.
The three-dimensional approach is critical to our work. The reason for that is that the world isn't two-dimensional. Buildings don't have flat facades, and heritage structures in particular that have seen the test of time are usually irregular, broken, and worn. Digital documentation could provide us with a precise, three-dimensional snapshot of those structures.
Scotland is a beautiful place, a historic place, with a heritage that has reached out to touch the lives of people across the globe. UNESCO has given World Heritage status to no fewer than 5 sites in Scotland, putting them on the same cultural and historical plane as the pyramids of Egypt and the Great Wall of China.
In Scotland, we're really lucky. We have 5 World Heritage sites inscribed by UNESCO. From the cotton mills of the industrial site in Lanark to Neolithic Orkney, to St Kilda out on the west coast, to Edinburgh, which you can see behind me, through to the Antonine Wall, which marked the frontier of the Roman Empire. Scottish 10 is an ambitious 5-year project to digitally document the 5 UNESCO World Heritage Sites of Scotland and also to document 5 overseas heritage sites.
In early 2009, the Scottish Government responded to a challenge laid down by laser scanning pioneer Ben Cassira of the non-profit SciArc Foundation to take part in an ambitious scheme to digitise many of the world's most important heritage sites. Scottish 10 would not only record the sites, it would look to share Scotland's technical expertise and foster important cultural and commercial links with overseas partners. To fulfil its part of the global project, the Scottish Government turned to Scotland's heritage agency, Historic Scotland, and its partner, the Glasgow School of Art.
The Digital Design Studio at the Glasgow School of Art has been involved with three-dimensional technology since its inception just over 10 years ago. Early on in the relationship between the art school and Historic Scotland, we started using the terrestrial scanning technology on small projects. And 2 of the most significant ones, I think, are the work that we did at Stirling Castle, in particular capturing the Royal Palace, which at the time was under renovation. And then another collaborative project that we did at Roslin Chapel to capture the exterior of the chapel as well as the interior.
It's this detailed approach, this innovative technology, that's now being used to drive the Scottish 10 project. The first Scottish 10 site to be chosen for digital documentation was the revolutionary cotton mill village at New Lanark, founded in 1785, close to the Falls of Clyde. Under the management of social pioneer Robert Owen, New Lanark transformed the lives of its inhabitants, ideas and opportunities that were 100 years or more ahead of their time.
Laser scanning is a very accurate and objective method of digitally documenting a heritage site in 3D. It works particularly well for places like New Lanark, where we are today. The laser scanner sends out a beam of laser energy. The laser beam returns to the scanner, and it uses the time taken for this return signal to be detected to compute the distance from the scanner to the target object. It records a point in 3-dimensional space. The laser scanner generates what is known as a cloud of points, or a point cloud, which really defines the surface geometry of the object of interest. We have scanned from about possibly 200 vantage points at New Lanark, which is a considerable amount of data. It's taken quite a lot of time, but we've managed to successfully join together all the individual scans. Today we're also georeferencing the scans, so that will mean that the surface geometry of New Lanark is tied down into a real-world coordinate system.
Georeferencing the Scottish 10 sites is really important. It places them in the context of the world. So within the world you should be able to find each Scottish 10 site in relationship to the country that it's actually in. And we use global navigation satellite systems to do that. Behind me you can see that we have a global navigation satellite system set up, and it's a base station. We have another base station which is relaying a signal to this station and allowing us to calculate the position of this very accurately down to the nearest millimetre.
We're currently at the Digital Design Studio, part of the Glasgow School of Art. The area that we're in is the visualisation area, where we deal a lot with the processing and registration of the point cloud data that we capture in the field. This is also the area where we undertake the photorealistic modelling. In the field, we will take a variety of photos of every building and every facade. We tend to try and photograph buildings when it's overcast. We try to minimise the amount of shadow. This all helps to create the impression of a photoreal model. Some of the more fun aspects of the projects are when we actually get to the stage where we've got a photorealistic model, and then we can be creative with animations and images, and really then you get to see the end results as they come up, and that's the rewarding part of it as well.
With the first Scottish site successfully captured, it was time for the Scottish 10 team to tackle its first international heritage site. The chosen site is both a national icon and a huge physical and logistical challenge. It would push the digital documentation techniques pioneered in Scotland to the limit. The site is Mount Rushmore. Here in the Black Hills of South Dakota, 4 monumental presidential sculptures are carved deep into a sheer mountainside.
We're all really excited about coming to Mount Rushmore. Some of the team have done a recce visit. We've ourselves have had a look at photographs and things like that. So this is our first trip into the mountains, and we're all really excited about getting our first glimpse of the sculpture. It's a great privilege for us to get the opportunity to actually climb up and actually stand on the president's heads.
Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln and Theodore Roosevelt gaze across the ages as the team set to work. The plan is to scan the monument, gather the data and piece it all together in a survey of unparalleled accuracy. This will not only enable us to gauge its condition today, it will also help guide preservation work in the future. Heavy rain delayed the first day's scanning. Fortunately, the team found much needed shelter from the elements in a vault originally designed to house the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States.
We're currently in the Hall of Records, just behind the heads at Mount Rushmore. This was intended to be the archive for the United States, and it was never finished.
We're ready to go.
So we're in here to scan it, to capture it, and document the way that it was constructed.
The weather was to have a further unwelcome surprise in store. The next morning, the team arrived to find a deep carpet of snow. With the Mount Rushmore heads again out of bounds, a decision is made to scan the studio of Gutzon Borglum, the sculptor who created the presidential heads. Here, Borglum created a scale model that would guide his workmen as they blasted, drilled and carved the rock. With the first good weather of the project, the team were finally able to reach the presidential heads. Before scanning could start, the essential targets had to be positioned by the National Park's rope team, with the first target secured onto the top of George Washington's head. The rope team then abseiled down past Lincoln to place a target that could be seen from the trail below. With the forecast of a beautiful day in prospect, the team made an early start up the mountain. Dr. Maureen Young takes up a commanding viewpoint high above the heads.
We're going to scan the full 360-degree panorama up here.
Doug Pritchard has reached the domed head of George Washington.
This is one of the most important scans. This is, we're on top of Washington. We have a great view of Lincoln down there. We have the forehead of Jefferson. Can't see Roosevelt, but that'll be picked up in later scans. But in terms of the first front scans, this is our most important.
Joining the team at Mount Rushmore was SCIARC founder Ben Kassira. As the inventor of the laser scanner, Ben had been motivated to scan the world's monuments after seeing the Taliban destroy the Bamiyan Buddhas in Afghanistan in 2001. If detailed laser scans of a site are available, he reasoned, then at least something would remain should it be threatened, whether by man-made or natural causes.
Well, SCIARC is a foundation that we started about 7 years ago with the mission of digitally preserving world monuments so that we can share them with our children and grandchildren, and as well as share them with the heritage community to help them do preservation. So it's wonderful for me to see that technology that was developed about 10 years ago by my company then to be launched and being used so successfully in these endeavors.
Target that's on the talus.
With the deadline fast approaching, a 5 a.m. start was made the next morning. Their efforts are well rewarded with a perfect day on the presidential heads. With a scan of Washington completed, it was on to Jefferson and Roosevelt. The ever-resourceful National Parks rope access team used a custom-made scanning rig to allow the scanner to reach into the inaccessible parts of the sculpture. Far below, on the presidential trail, the second scanning team see the first images start to emerge. Real progress at last. Today is a big day for Doug Pritchard. He's to abseil with a member of the rope team to a precarious ledge below Jefferson's head. Scan completed, he abseils down past Roosevelt to the presidential chins with views of Lincoln and Jefferson. It's a unique opportunity to get up close and personal with the presidents. The astonishing detail of the sculpture clearly visible. Despite the bad weather and the difficulties of the location, the scans are seamless. Now, for the first time, we have a single, accurate digital record of this remarkable heritage site.
Heritage sites, like any other sites, are exposed. Some of our heritage sites are particularly delicate. If we think in the longer term about things like climate change.
One of these sites is the heart of Neolithic Orkney. 4 monuments described by UNESCO as unquestionably among the most important Neolithic sites in Western Europe.
Well, here we are at Maes Howe, in the centre of the Neolithic heart of Orkney. This is our first day and we're starting the digital survey here, carrying out the laser scan of the World Heritage Site. Well, Orkney is such a fantastic site for archaeology. I mean, there are so many rich remains here dating back 5,000 years. So we're right in the centre of the Neolithic complex here, and we have Ring of Brodgar over in the distance, Stones of Stennis behind us. Well, because the sites are quite disparate, the challenge is going to be tying them together and setting them within their landscape. At Maes Howe in particular, the particular challenge is going to be tying the interior with the exterior, because we only have one entranceway and it's a long narrow passageway.
Maes Howe is a Neolithic masterpiece of design and architecture. Dating from around 5,000 years ago, this gently sloping mound hides one of the best preserved Neolithic chambered tombs in Europe. Its long, narrow entrance passageway aligned with the setting of the midwinter sun. Whether the chamber was meant for the elite of the society or its entire people, we can't be sure. What we do know was that over 4,000 years later, a group of Norsemen broke into the burial chamber looking for treasure. If they found anything, they took it away with them. However, they did leave behind something of their own. a remarkable set of runic carvings made with Viking axes. Even these faint markings could be clearly documented by the specialist scanner. Not far away lies the next site in the complex, the Stones of Stennis. It was once a ceremonial stone circle made up of massive standing stones. To the north of Stennis is an even larger circle, the Ring of Broger. This truly impressive Neolithic stone ring was made up of more than 60 stones and is regarded by UNESCO as the finest stone circle of its type in the world. Unsurprisingly, this also makes it one of Orkney's most popular visitor attractions, and the team had to wait their turn before they could get to work. When they did, they had to contend with a type of cloud altogether different from their usual point cloud data.
We've had quite a lot of problems with the midges up here, the clouds of midges on days where there is not a strong wind, and we've actually had a look at some of the data from those days, and we've had clouds of insects within the point cloud data, so that will have to be removed digitally back in the office.
As the daylight fades from the Arcadian sky, the team remain hard at work scanning the ancient stones for future generations. The lines of laser light clearly visible in the still summer air. The final site for the team in Orkney is one of the best preserved Neolithic sites in the world. Skara Brae remained hidden until 1850, when a violent storm tore away the sand dune and exposed the Stone Age village. The original stone furniture remains in many of the houses, along with a range of ritual and domestic artefacts.
We're inside one of the houses at Skara Brae at the moment. The team's been working here for a couple of days now, and we're working our way around with a variety of scanners trying to cover this site in its entirety. It's one of the best areas that you can visit as an archaeologist. It's such a rich history, and it's just fantastic to be able to explore all of these different monuments and to spend time with them.
Few places in Scotland hold the imagination in quite the same way as the team's next location. St Kilda is one of only 27 sites in the world, have been listed by UNESCO for both their natural and their cultural heritage.
Our journey out to St Kilda was by boat this time, and the crossing was fairly horrendous. It was quite a rough crossing, took us about 3 hours. St Kilda is just the most amazing site. Coming in by boat or coming in by helicopter, it's just an incredible sight of this green land in the middle of the Atlantic. So spectacular and so special.
The inhabitants of St Kilda lived in the village, a single street surrounded by hundreds of cleats. The dry stone structures used to store the summer harvest of seabirds and fuel for the winter. The remarkably moving story of the St Kildans, eking a living out here on the edge of the world, continues to fascinate. Though the last inhabitants were evacuated in 1930, their houses and their storehouses, known as cleats, remain. These resilient structures form a central part of the Scottish Ten's work on the islands, as the team seek to produce the most accurate survey ever undertaken here.
We're here at St Kilda to thoroughly document, three-dimensionally document, the settlement areas on St Kilda. So we're here with a combined team from Historic Scotland and the Glasgow School of Art to go from basically one settlement area to another, scanning the roadways, the cleats, the fence lines, and the individual houses.
A recording of the site is essential. We will produce possibly the most accurate survey of the site that's ever been produced.
One of the ideas behind our projects is to encourage virtual tourism by being able to use the 3D technologies, by being able to photorealistically model up these areas using the scanning equipment and other technologies, enabling people to virtually visit St Kilda. I mean, this is an incredibly remote island. It took us almost a day to get here. You know, it's a tough trip. It's a real privilege to be here, frankly, to be able to capture this site. So the idea is that with the content that we have now, we can then put it onto the internet. We could create special presentations to show people what it's really like to be here.
On their return to the Scottish mainland, the team faced challenges on a different scale.
Edinburgh is a vast World Heritage Site, obviously, so we have to use all the tools we have at our disposal. We're at the stage with Edinburgh, we've just completed the block model, which we've undertaken using airborne LiDAR, and allows us to undertake a kind of generic model of Edinburgh. We'll follow that up over the next 6 months with terrestrial scanning undertaken on the ground by the team. We're around 2 years in to the Scottish 10 project at this time. Our first international site was Mount Rushmore. We're about to document a step well in Gujarat in northwest India, which is incredibly exciting and a project that many people know little about in terms of the site and its history.
Rani Ki Vav, or the Queen's Step Well near Patan, was built in the early part of the 11th century as a communal water source. But this highly practical structure is also an architectural masterpiece with exquisite carvings and multi-storied pavilions. The team also hoped to bring Rani Ki Vav to a much wider international audience. In scanning some of the world's most precious heritage sites, the Scottish 10 team are almost literally getting under the skin of history. Hoarding, mapping and digitising the sites, and through them any number of ancient cultures, they're not only seeking to preserve the past, but to bring it alive for future generations.
So we can use the Scottish 10 to build strong and real relationships through working together that hopefully can build longer-term relationships on an economic basis.
It's been quite a journey. It's been exciting, exhilarating, but at the same time it's been a tough one. Part of my being so excited and so delighted is really to see this very important monument to be digitally preserved forever.
I see the Scottish 10 as the start of the journey rather than the end in itself.